This is a topic we keep receiving stories about. It's truly incredible the number of people who have lived through very, very strange experiences riding the Mexico City metro. The energy charge in that place is unbelievable, more than any other space in this city. And goodness does it have history. It's not hard to imagine that the 20 million odd people who inhabit it every day could provoke phenomena or energy charges somewhere else. If you have a story in this metro or the metro in your city, do share it. But for now, it's time to let yourself go. Turn off the light, and if you're listening to us from the metro, good luck. You're arriving at the next station of Tales of the Night. Listen, I don't know if what happened to me was something real, something inexplicable, or simply an elaborate prank. Although I wouldn't understand with what intention, someone would have done this to me. It happened just a few weeks ago, but I still can't stop thinking about it. Maybe to someone else it will seem completely normal, or silly even. But it was definitely a strange experience, and at the time, it terrified me. I left work quite late and walked with a coworker to the Bellas Artes metro station. She was going to take line 2 to Tasqueña, where she would try to catch the light rail. She barely said goodbye to me, because she ran out to her platform. I took line 8 to Escuadron 201 station, where my dad would be waiting to walk home with me. The usual people waited there, few for that time of night, and I started listening to some super long audio messages that had been sent to the work group about some issues that had just come up. I settled in at the back of the car as usual and drifted into my thoughts. I'm not sure if it was 1 or 2 stations later that I looked back at the platform we had just left and thought it looked extremely dark, as if it had been abandoned. I looked back at my car, and there was just one person left in it. I couldn't see his face because he was sitting with his back to me at the other end of the car. But he was wearing one of those old school hats. His back was very straight and his gaze remained forward. I ignored him because, let's be honest, there are always weird people on the metro. It's nothing out of the ordinary, but a strange feeling washed over me. At the next station, I anxiously hoped that someone would get in my car, so I wouldn't be alone with this person. Unfortunately, no one got on. Oh well, I thought. Just a few more stations, everything will be all right. As the train started moving, the lights flickered. I was trying to focus on my phone, but there was no signal to download the latest voice notes. And when I looked back up, there were now 2 people in hats, dressed exactly the same. One on each side of the car, with their backs to me, as if they were a mirror. They didn't look back at me. They just stood there staring straight ahead. Everything was suddenly blurry. I couldn't even see into the next car. I don't know if the lights kept flickering or if I was getting lightheaded, but at the same time, I started hearing old music playing in the car. When we got to the next station, I ran out. Unfortunately, it was empty, but I saw a cop in the distance and ran up to him. I didn't say anything to him, but knowing he was close reassured me. The train moved on. As it passed me, I was able to catch a glance of the 2 gentlemen inside it. They both looked back at me, again, as if one was the reflection of the other, as if they were synchronized, or one and the same. They seemed to be an abnormal shade of white, and I could swear that they had no features. At least I couldn't make out any. Although many people have lived through very strange things in the metro, no one I've shared this with has experienced anything similar. My dad still tells me not to worry, that I imagined it. But I'm not going to ride that metro line alone again. My story takes place in the metro, but I'm not sure it's due to one of those strange phenomenons it's known for. It happened almost a decade ago now. It was after school and I was working at a friend's house. I stayed there until 8 o'clock at night, when I thought it would be best to go home. My neighborhood had gotten a bit unsafe recently. There were dangerous people that one of my best friends had gotten involved with. And well, apparently, the whole group was threatened. Hardly anyone went out. Everyone had holed up, so to speak. But I couldn't stop going to school during final exams. The only thing I could do was get there early while the street was still quiet. The friend I was studying with lived near the university. From there, I took the metro to get off in Colonia Guerrero. The train was stopped when I got to it, but no one was making a fuss about it. I found an empty seat and leaned my head back to rest. I was so tired that in just a few seconds, I fell asleep. Have you ever fallen asleep so quickly and so deeply that even if you wake up a few seconds later, you somehow manage to dream? That's what happened to me. I opened my eyes and the metro was still stopped. But I swear the people around me were different. I mean, I hadn't paid much attention when I got on. But that's how I felt. I was confused and leaned my head back again and, again, fell asleep. A few seconds later, I opened my eyes. We were still stopped at the same station. But now, I swear it was clear to me that the people in that car were not the same as before. It felt very strange, as if I was dreaming. The only thing I thought of was to get off. I got out of the car, confused, and it immediately started moving. I looked at my phone, and it was 8:20. At least 15 minutes had passed since I had gotten on, but I felt like it had only been a matter of minutes. I did my best to wake myself up completely, to be fully aware. So I got on the next train feeling back to normal, and remained standing to make sure I wouldn't fall asleep again. I finally arrived at my station and hurried off. I didn't want to encounter any trouble since it was late. When I got to my street, very close to Guerrero Station, I ran into another friend's mom. She was crying. There were lots of people gathered around. And when I got closer, I saw two of my friends lying motionless on the ground. A few meters away was another who managed to run and hide behind a car. He was being tended to while waiting for the ambulance. As it seemed, someone came to collect on a debt owed by one of them, not caring that the rest of our friends were innocent. And I know that if I had gotten there a few minutes earlier, I would have been with them at that moment. I'll never be able to explain what happened. I've never lived any other paranormal experience. But this was more than enough. I had a somewhat strange experience on the blue line of the Mexico City Metro. However, upon searching the internet, I realized I'm not the only one something like this has happened to. It was Sunday, and I got on at Panteones Station. I was going to visit my girlfriend at the time and had to transfer at Hidalgo. I remember I wasn't paying much attention. I've gotten used to almost unconsciously counting the stations. But I looked up when we got to San Cosme. Then I stayed glued to my phone when we got to Revolucion. And then I automatically got up, because the next stop was my destination. When the door opened, I got off. But something very weird happened. We had arrived at San Cosme Station again. It never felt like we were going backwards. The train was always moving in the same direction, but it wasn't just me. A lady who got off at the same time as me was experiencing the same confusion. She got out and looked around, bizarrely, then got back on the train, surely thinking she had been distracted, and nothing more. But it wasn't a mistake or a distraction. I am completely certain we arrived at the same station twice. You have now reached the middle of this episode. We hope that if you have lived a strange experience, however small, in Mexico City's metro or your city's metro, you will share it with us. Remember, my name is Uriel Reyes, and you're listening to Tales of the Night. What I'm going to tell you happened to me on December 24th, 2022. As soon as I got off work, I hurried to go to my grandpa's house, where the family was gathering, as we usually do on Christmas Eve. I ran to the metro station because the train was arriving. I'm not going to say which one because I know someone will point it out in the comments. Suddenly, I heard a horrible scream of fear. Heart-wrenching. When I got to the platform to see what was going on, I saw a lady screaming, pointing down toward the tracks, saying a girl had just jumped. Other people were also observing closely. The driver stopped the train halfway down the platform. I'm usually very scared of these kinds of things, but at that moment, I think adrenaline took over me. I ran to the front of the train and was about to jump onto the tracks to take a look, to see if the girl was okay. But a cop stopped me. He signaled to the driver to keep going, and people started yelling at him. They almost lynched the poor guy. They told him there was someone down there. How could he tell him to move forward? A group of people stayed back in shock, while others got on the train, which continued forward as if everything was normal. And when it did, there was absolutely nothing strange on the tracks. The cop said somewhat mockingly that we could now go look for the girl, help her out. But there was no one there. The lady who had screamed started crying, and I guess that made the cop realize he wasn't helping anyone by being so sarcastic. So he apologized to us. He said that yes, someone had jumped, but that it had happened in the 90s. Every now and then, on Saturdays, people claim to see someone appear out of nowhere and jump onto the tracks as the train is arriving. Many drivers are prepared, but others aren't. In any case, they always have to stop. They can never assume that what they're seeing is a ghost. He gave the train permission to continue because he was right there, paying close attention, and knew no one had jumped. And well, community, I didn't see anything on that occasion. But there were at least 4 people, including a lady having a panic attack, who swore they saw that girl jump. My story took place one night when there was a party near Balderas. I took line 1 at Tacubaya. It was just a few stations to get there. Both the platforms and the trains were quite empty and calm. But I didn't get into the last car because there was a lone man in there. And strange things are said about the last cars of each fleet. Nothing paranormal, but that they're used for hookups, that kind of stuff. So I got on the second to last one, which was completely empty, and sat near the door. At the next station, the man who was in the last car moved into mine and sat across from me on one of those benches that face each other. I immediately felt some distrust, but I didn't want to get off, so I just looked down. But then, I didn't want him to feel that I was uncomfortable, so I turned to look out the window to avoid eye contact. But I could see him out of the corner of my eye, and could tell he was very thin. Extremely so. His gaze was so heavy I could feel him smiling at me. I wanted to avoid any conflict, and my trip was short, so I kept ignoring him. Eventually, I turned my back to him by sitting sideways on the bench. At Sevilla Station, several people got on, including a group of guys who seemed to be going to a party too. That gave me the confidence to look up, to look directly at him for the first time. But there was no one there. It was impossible for him to have gotten off, and I could still feel his gaze over me, as if he was still sitting right there where there was no one. I got off at Balderas and walked to the party address, feeling very confused and pretty scared. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following me. When I told my friends about it, they said it wasn't that rare of an occurrence, that they had heard similar stories before. That on line 1, on that stretch in particular, you can see someone traveling alone in the last car, and you should never, under any circumstances, make eye contact with them. I don't know. I want to think it was all a misunderstanding, but so many things are said about the metro that I don't know what to believe anymore. What have you all heard about the last car on line 1? What's the craziest legend or story you've heard about the metro? One time, my brother and I witnessed something very strange that I'm sure you're not going to believe. A tremendous downpour fell in Mexico City and we just barely made it to a station without getting completely soaked. When we got on, the train would stop in the tunnels for several minutes at a time. We didn't know why, but we thought maybe an area was flooding, which was forcing all the trains to stop. The light powered off and on at times, but I think all of us passengers were just grateful to have gotten on the train before it had filled up with people running from the rain. There was a particularly long stop before getting to Pantitlan, where we would transfer. We were again left in the tunnel, and for a moment, the light went out. As soon as it did, we heard a scream from a young man. He screamed that there was someone out there in the tunnel. We all looked out, but the light was flickering, so we couldn't make out what was out there. When it finally came back on, all we could see were our reflections in the windows. The light suddenly went out again. Another scream. This time from the entire half of the car that had been looking out the window. There was something out there. A person, maybe? I don't know. But something was standing in the darkness, leaning against the tunnel wall. Stranger than a human being, like one of those giant bats from the Philippines. Its head was terrifying, because it wasn't exactly an animal's head either. It seemed like a person covering themselves with wings. When the light came back on just an instant later, several people tried to film it. But I think it was useless, because as much as I've looked for images of it on the internet, I've never found any. My brother has convinced himself over time that it was a prank, that someone set up a figure or puppet, maybe even made of cardboard, that they put it halfway down the tunnel to scare innocent people traveling and looking into the dark. But I will never convince myself of that theory, though I would love to. I will never forget the fear we all felt at that moment, in that metro car.